Hey everyone, welcome to a new plastic scanner update video. With the plastic scanner project, we're making a device that can identify the most common types of plastic to make plastic recycling simpler and doing it all in an open source kind of way. And in this update video I would really like to go into detail in this open source kind of working, because as you can see I'm not in a really regular office workspace setting. It's because I'm on a small holiday. I'm in Portugal visiting the Project Camp community, and here they're trying to find out what it takes to have a sustainable way of living, but they also do it in an open source way. So it's the same people who started the Precious Plastic group, and I want to know what drives them into making a project open source, how it can be useful, how it can be challenging. So this video will basically be a small interview with Dave Hakkens, the guy who started this, on open source. So not a lot of development of the plastic scanner itself, but then again hopefully it will still be useful and interesting. So let's dive straight into it and enjoy the video.
I'm Dave Hakkens, designer from Netherlands, currently in Portugal in Project Camp. Project Camp is, I'm not really sure what it's really about, we're still figuring it out, but it's basically trying to find a way to live more sustainable in life, whatever that means. So we bought a piece of land here in Portugal to try out, explore new technologies, to research, to see what would be a better way to live as a human without harming the planet so much. I think the best thing about Project Camp is that we don't have an answer. Like, we don't say this is how it should be done. It's more like a big question, no one has the answer. It would also be strange if someone would have the answer. So I think it's more trying to figure it out. And whoever comes tries to figure it out with us. Yeah, I think with many things in the world, like in a way there are already many good solutions, many good tools, many good examples how to live. But there's always this thing coming in that someone tried to capitalize on it. So I think I'm a firm believer of open source, because you just neutrally present possibilities and then people can decide what to do with it, yes or no. And I think the same would be here. You sort of just present what could be an alternative and then people can take it or not. So in that sense the same as with precious plastic. You just have a big industry that has massive machines and want to recycle the plastic, but it's very hidden, patents, whatever. So once the goal of precious plastic was to make that more open source so everyone can do it, they can decide whether they like plastic recycling or not, but at least the possibility is there. I think if you think about it from a simplistic point of view, yes, because it's kind of logical, no? If you come up with a solution, what you want is that solution not just for yourself but for everyone. So I think deep down inside everyone would like to share their ideas and see other people benefiting from the thing they thought of. I think it's just in grown-up world you start to think about, yeah, okay, but I need to make money out of that. How does this pay back in the long term? So you get all these schemes on top of it. But I think fundamentally what you want is, yeah, just free information. People just develop and ideally you can sustain yourself from that. No, yeah. I think in terms of open source it's also easy to make a lot of crap. But I think with open source you kind of have to trust that the crowd uses the knowledge wisely. So it's easily to open source, I don't know, how do you make an atomic bomb? Which you could do. But ideally society is developed in a way that people have the knowledge, they know, but they just don't take it because they don't think it makes sense. Which is also a long way to go. I mean, society is not necessarily there. But I think ideally that would be the world. I think it's hard, like, because there's always this sort of the real world scenario where realistically, yeah, you get a job, you need to make money, you go to a company, they don't work in an open source way. So if I would have a school and I want to make sure my students find a job later on, I wouldn't necessarily train them to be open source. Because realistically, the lower chances for them to find their path in conventional world. If I think of what should the future of the world look like and what kind of thinking there should be more, I would go for open source. But I can imagine not every school works like that, thinking what would be best for the world, but more like how do we make sure the students finds its way in the current world and not in the future world. Open source can be a mess, like fuck. So many people, so many different backgrounds, ways of documentation, different versions. It can be beautiful to find all the little things and tweaks people make, and it can be overwhelming. And that's usually, I think, where companies are good at, or private businesses. They filter out all the crap and they take out that one thing. The world is open source, takes you a lot of effort sometimes to find the solutions. But the field's also getting better and better at that, as open source tools develop, especially in the world of software, super streamlined. So I think it's a matter of more how do you organize humans to be open source. And the downside is, especially for hardware, there are not that many economically sustainable examples out there. It's often more from donations or something, which works, but it's not necessarily a very proven model that you can easily replicate. More and more, but it's not very common yet. I think it helps a lot, because I think a lot of people deep down inside believe in open source, but they just don't really see how that could maybe sustain them, how it would fit into this world. So I think the more projects that are there, as an example, the more it's easier for people to join that movement. Yeah, I think it's hard. It's a tough question. We have this a lot with Fresh Plastic at the moment. Like, in a way, we don't want to steer the project because it's from the community and everyone is involved. But also not everyone. I mean, if you're just leaving comments in a Discord, it's different than actually setting up a workspace and recycling plastic on a daily basis. But the person recycling might be less active and engaged in the community on a daily basis than the one chatting in a Discord. So it's very hard within a community to filter out who gets the loudest voice in making decisions, who has the most influence, and ideally it's the people on the ground on a daily basis that use the project the most. I'd say for Fresh Plastic we're now trying to figure that out more, like, yeah, how can this community organize themselves a bit more? Yeah, I feel like there are not many good examples of that out there, but that would be my ideal scenario. There's not really one owner, it's just the most involved people have the most say in how it should be going. I think the plastic scanner is actually a super useful product because it's the main bottleneck in plastic recycling. Like, people want to recycle, but realistically so much is thrown away just because they don't know what type of plastic it is, so it just ends up in a pile somewhere. I do think it's a very complex product to develop. So many different types of plastic, so many variables, so many UV radiation, different ways how it's used, scratches, like I could see it being complex, but very valuable, especially if you can make it accessible. Yeah, so I think we're learning this a bit with Fresh Plastic, that if you make things cheaper, or let's say easier to buy, you might have more people buying it or getting it, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are actually using it, because it's easy nowadays to buy something, to get excited about something this week and next week not again. So I think what is valuable, if you find the people that actually use it on a daily basis and not just have it there in a closet somewhere. I think if you're a professional with it, you might actually pay a bit more for it, because that it works properly, it's reliable. So I think it's finding this balance in not making it almost too accessible and cheap, but trying to find this way where it's reliable and good enough that a sort of professional would use it on a daily basis, and ideally affordable. But because it's kind of easy to make it like too cheap and then shitty quality. I think that is very hard as well to achieve this line. But I think that would be the most valuable group to have, the people that actually use it.
Cool.
Yes.
That's it.
Plastic scanner people. Hey, help Jerry to develop this thing.